Okay, so we are official. It's week 1 of Live Your Best Life 2021. So just a quick introduction of myself and Stacy. I'm Lisa Groft, and I'm actually the fitness director here at Milestone. I've been here for 17 years. And this is Stacy Vicari, right? I want to make sure that's
Vicari.
Vicari, okay. Yeah. Stacy Vicari. And she and I have known each other for a really long time. This is our first partnership. Her business and Milestone are celebrating their 20-year anniversaries this year. So we decided it would be a great opportunity to partner and share our expertise with you guys. We hope you'll enjoy it. We're really looking forward to it. I have notes over here too, because I want to make sure that we don't miss anything. Mm-hmm. So let me see. So the main thing is each week we have specific topics that we're going to talk about, and you will probably have questions, but if you wait until the very end, we will have a section for questions when you can ask and then have your questions answered. If you don't want to do it live and in person, you can always contact me or Stacy privately. And you can do that through our email addresses, which we will share with our post after the fact. And you can email us and ask us any questions if you have them. So if you don't mind, hold your questions till the end and we're going to get started. So this week's topic is getting motivated for the new year. Stacy, you want to start us off?
Sure. So there are several things that I'm going to talk about today, but the first thing I want to do is kind of talk about the purpose of this 5-week series. So our goal from this is to help you establish mindfulness and some structure and good habits, not just for the 5 weeks that we're doing this, but we're going to guide you through that. So by the time we launch at the end of the 5 weeks, people are feeling like they've got a plan for the new year. And that's really our intention, is to move beyond January into something that can be the template for you February through December. So we're really excited about that. So I'm excited about all the topics in our series, but I love motivation. I love having motivation. I love sharing motivation. And there are about five things that are kind of my checklist at the start of the year that I go through as I plan for the new year, and I plan to sort of set the stage for my own personal motivation and for the motivation I share with my clients. So I want to share those 5 things with you. Lisa's going to chime in a bit later. She didn't mention, but from week to week, we sort of divided it. Some of the sections, and maybe you mentioned this, Lisa, our expertise tends to lean a little bit differently. So this week, I'm going to sort of be the more dominant speaker because motivation, especially as it comes to one's whole life, is something under my wheelhouse. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa in a bit to talk specifically about fitness. So there are 5 things that I want to talk about today. The first 3 we'll talk about now. I'll turn it over to Lisa, and then I'll talk about a couple more at the end. So there are 3 things that I think are really important when we think of getting motivated. The first thing is to recognize that for me, motivation is synonymous with preparation. I think that there's feeding off of motivation, like you might get motivated after this segment today, but the motivation that we're really hoping to instill in you is the kind of motivation that can be sustained. So whether or not you have external lifting or external motivation, you can sort of muster it from within. So the way that I maintain a very high level of motivation in my own personal life is by being really prepared for the things that I value and the things that I say I want in my life. And so at the start of the year, there are 3 things that I specifically do. I tend to start this I kind of start doing this between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then pretty heavily between Christmas and New Year's. It doesn't matter if you're watching this and you haven't done any of this yet. It doesn't matter. I'm still refining, actually, and still working on my New Year stuff. It's a very elaborate process, because I guess it's like this. If you think of how much effort you put into your job, in your career, your education, your training, all of the work that you do to get rewards and raises and have good evaluations, I really take that same approach when I'm planning my own personal life. Like, I think that's equally important as anything else we can do. So the first thing I do is I reflect. I pause and I reflect. And in our culture, that's not always easy to do. Number one, it's hard to do that because it takes time, but also it's hard to do that because sometimes what we have to reflect on isn't positive. We're not happy with what we have to reflect on. But I really think that at the start of the year, it's crucial for us to take stock. And so what that looks like is sitting down on your computer or on paper and really evaluating 2020 in year in review. And so this is a chance for you to think about what I always start with the negative, actually. I always start by asking myself, so what didn't work for me during the year? What didn't I like? What attributes in myself were present that I wasn't pleased with? How did I show up for myself and in my relationships that maybe I want to tweak going into the year? So I first look at myself, and then I look at my life, and I think about everything that didn't work. And I write all that down. I don't judge that. I don't feel bad about any of that. I just observe it and I write it down. It's very important that you write this down. Okay. I'm an advocate for writing, but I also like to type. I do both. So either way is totally fine, but it's important that you put it on paper. And so first I do that. I reflect on everything that didn't work and isn't working. And I guide my clients to do the same thing. The second thing that I then do is I reflect on what did work. Like, what did I like about the year? And what do I want more of in my life? What would serve me if I focused on it more this year? And this, I really take the time to do this. So I write all this out. And then what I have in front of me is sort of like the before and the after. And then I craft that into a vision. And then I start to think about, okay, in the coming 12 months, how do I want this to look? What do I have coming up in the year? Like, all of us have COVID still, right? We still have COVID. So we're looking at that and we're kind of weighing that over here. And then we want to move beyond COVID, right? Because that's valid, but that can also be an excuse. So then I look at, okay, these 12 months, and I really craft a vision. And then I'm a really big fan of a word of the year. And I have my clients choose a word of the year. I take them through the same process of coming up with their word of the year, is to first look at the negatives, then look at the positive. So the word of the year to me is, it can be one of several things, but it's basically a theme. If there's one word that if you were to use it as it's intended, sort of to serve as the filter, I sort of use the metaphor of a water filter. For those of us that are health conscious, we might put a water filter on our faucet. The idea is that all the debris coming through gets filtered out, and then we're left with clean water. I think what we need on a daily basis is to maintain motivation, and that's really challenging. So we need a filter through which we can sort of separate the crud in our lives from the positive, uplifting things that keep us inspired. And that's what the word is for me. I sort of use that as a filter. And so when I recommend what word of the year people choose, it can be a theme, it can be something very specific, but it needs to be something that you really reflect on, that if you dwelled on that word for the whole year, when we're sitting down this time next year, you would feel like your life has been transformed. So I think that's pretty powerful. And so you could do lots of things with your word. So once you come up with your word, I tend to journal a lot at the beginning of the year. So I write down, okay, if this is my word, and it's my word of the year, exuberant. So this is my word of the year. And then what I do is I always type up an exhaustive list of definitions for my word of the year. So I go to multiple dictionary sources. So this is exuberant, and these are all the various definitions of exuberant that resonates with me for the new year. And so then what I do is, after I've created that definition, then I sit down and I think of all of the different parts of my life and what exuberance would look like in those various parts of my life. And I then define that. I actually write all that down. And so what I'm doing is I'm giving my brain a database of what to recognize in the present moment when I'm not feeling exuberant. And so once I know, okay, it looks like this with my relationships. It looks like this with getting out of bed in the morning when I'm still a little bit tired. It looks like this when I want to stay up late at night, but I know going to sleep earlier would help me feel exuberant the next morning. Like, I define all that so that when I'm living my life and I'm getting sucked into the vortex of comfort, I've got that filter through which to evaluate and process my decisions. So hope that makes sense. So I'm going to pause for just a second. I feel like, even though, Lisa, you're coming, I'm going to jump into next goals versus resolutions and how to set them. But I just wanted to see, Lisa, if you want to chime in so we could, I feel like I'm talking way more than you. So why don't
I'm soaking it all in too. I think all of us, no matter our profession, no matter our background, need someone to hold us accountable. And that was something we said we were going to talk about. What we didn't really talk about at the beginning is, I'm a personal trainer, so I help people with their fitness and wellness goals. And you're a life coach and you help people with their entire life goals. And so I'm soaking it all up. I'm really interested in this. So how to come up with your word of the year. And I love that you put it on the word board or whatever you call that. I have a message board in my office that I use. It'd be a great place to put that. I'm just trying to think of what my word would be. So
yeah, it's really fun. And it's a great way for you it's something I recommend, even if I'm working with one client and say I'm not working with other members of their family or their partner. I really encourage people to do this in clusters with their closest friends, with their closest family members, because the more that you have somebody that you're engaging in these conversations with, the more likely it is to stay alive. And then certainly with my clients, I'm constantly circling back at various points through the year and checking in on that word on a pretty regular basis with many clients. So those are the first two things I always do, that I make sure I check that box. I do a lot of personal reflection to evaluate my life and to look at how last year went and how I want to change this year. From that reflection, I create a vision for this is all very high level still, by the way. This isn't like getting in the weeds with what that vision looks like in terms of taking action. It's more inspirational. I find a lot of inspiration from doing this work. So that's the second part, is I reflect and then I create that vision. And then that leads to part 2, which is the word of the year. So I do that. So then the next thing I do is I work on setting my goals for the new year. So I want to make a distinction, because I'm not really a big fan of resolutions, though I suppose a resolution may be better than not doing anything, but I'm not even sure of that. So I want to make a distinction between a resolution and a goal. And so to me, when I think of a resolution, I think of it as people making a firm statement of something that they're going to do or not do. I resolve this year to quit smoking, or I resolve this year to lose 50 pounds. It usually goes like that. And then for a lot of people, that's the extent of it, is if just making that proclamation is enough to actually follow through for 12 solid months to achieve that by the end of the year, which of course most of us know doesn't happen. And it mostly by January 11th, maybe some of you already tuning in, if you've been thinking about this as a resolution, then maybe some of you already are realizing, wow, I'm not making it. So I just want to encourage people to think of their life in terms of setting goals, which is more about a direction. It's more about setting intentions. It's about planning. It goes back to the beginning where I talk about being prepared, and it's mostly about setting realistic action steps to accomplish things. So those are the 3 main things that I do. I'm going to talk a little bit about some more actionable things here at the end, but I wanted to turn it over to you, Lisa, to talk to us about goals, because a lot of people tuning in here have all sorts of life goals, but fitness and health is really a number one for a lot of people.
Especially this time of year. So like it or not, we as human beings kind of gravitate toward our health and wellness in the beginning of January. I don't know if it's the media has done that, or if we've done that to ourselves, where we kind of say, all right, it's a new year, it's a new me kind of mentality. So I deal with that a lot with clients who come out of the woodwork who I haven't seen in a couple of months, or members in general at the gym. So it is something to discuss, I think, as a personal trainer and as a life coach, to acknowledge that does happen and people do have that mentality. But I like Stacy's mentality so much better of don't just set a resolution. Let's talk about some real, specific goals that you could actually achieve, and come up with a word of the year and have a theme, instead of I'm going to quit smoking this year and not have any direction behind it. So, a lot of the times when people come to me and they say, I don't even know how often I'm supposed to be exercising or what would work for me, it's so specific to each person, because like I work out about 5 days a week. So if I were to go to a personal trainer and say, I want to set my goals for working out, what makes sense? Well, then that trainer should say, well, what are you doing now? And what can you do to improve? Or let's look at what you're doing in those 5 days to increase the quality instead of quantity. Versus if somebody is not working out at all, or if they've taken 8 months off due to COVID and they're starting fresh again, well, maybe you don't want to start out with 5 days a week. Maybe you start out with 3 days a week of 10 to 15 minutes, just something that's more realistic and achievable. And that's not going to leave you feeling, defeated. You don't want to feel defeated when you don't reach your goals. You want to set something that's achievable and you feel good about it, so that you're more likely to keep coming back and doing more. So that is so important to not set yourself up for failure by setting these big, lofty goals that probably aren't even achievable. Like if you say, I want to lose 100 pounds this year, that's a lofty goal. I mean, it's possible if you have enough to lose, but maybe talk about losing the first 10 pounds first, something like that. So a little bit at a time is, biting off a little bit at a time rather than more than you can chew is the way to go when setting your fitness goals.
Yeah. And there's two things I want to add to that also that's really important when you think about staying motivated. One thing is about just living in the present moment, because I think what happens with a lot of people that set resolutions or even intentions and goals is that if we deviate from what our intention was, there's such negative self-talk that people engage in that it becomes a self-fulfilling, defeating prophecy. And so I just really want to encourage people to just say, yesterday doesn't matter. Not even yesterday. Like if I know a lot of people aren't in an office environment, but using that as an example, you set the intention to eat really well today, you go to the office, somebody brought a dessert, you had some, and then a lot of people slip into this mentality of, oh, I blew it, I'm going to start tomorrow. And then they just, or sometimes people are just like, I blew it, I can't eat healthy, that's not for me. But if you're living in the present moment, then whatever this moment is a new choice. Like the day is filled with choice after choice after choice. And we get to vote for what we want to put into our bodies. So it doesn't matter that you might have eaten something bad in the morning because now it's lunchtime. It's a whole new opportunity for you to vote. So that's the first thing, is to stay in the
vote.
present
I
moment.
like that.
Vote. And then this leads to the other one, and they connect so much. But this idea of perfectionism, it is so chronic. It is such a pervasive issue that I work with my clients. Some of you are watching this right now, and you know who you are. Anyway, so perfectionism is a really big issue for people. And it's like, if it isn't going to be perfect, then we're going to wait on the sidelines until everything is just so in order to do it. But I really like what you said, Lisa. 15 minutes of something is better than an hour of nothing, right? Like one of my favorite quotes, I'd rather have 80% or 70% or 90% of something than 100% of nothing. So it's just much better to just do what you can do and celebrate that, as opposed to wait until everything perfectly lines up to take action and then feel really bad about yourself because you're sitting in the sidelines. So there's two more things that I just want to mention, and I guess it's sort of a little bit in our kind of action step section. Lisa, do you want me to just dive into these last two things, or?
Sure, but one thing I wanted to say really quickly is when you say that people want everything to be perfectly lined up before they start on their goal, a really good example of that, and I'm not exaggerating, I've heard it 100 times or more over the years, when people say, I want to get in shape before I start working with a trainer. Isn't that my job, is to help you get in shape? But that's the mentality that we're dealing with. I want to get in shape because they're embarrassed or they feel like they're not going to be good enough. And that is not the case at all. That's why professionals like us are there to help. Yes. One foot in front of the other. We're not there to get you to the finish line right away. So
that's right. I
just wanted to throw that in.
Think of another one is I hear people all the time that are like, yeah, I really need to get a housekeeper, but I have to clean my house before I can hire a housekeeper. It's like, wait a minute, I think that's their job. There's two last things that I just want to talk about in terms of action steps, but I think I'm jumping ahead. Did you want to say anything before we?
No,
I know we've got like 3 more minutes, I guess.
Go ahead.
Open it. Okay. So there's just 2 things that I also do. I mentioned there's 5 things that I do. 3 of them I've mentioned: reflect, word of the year, setting goals for the year, which by the way should connect to your larger life, right? So that's important, is not just to set your goals in a vacuum of what you need in this moment, but how this moment connects to the larger tapestry of your life. You'll be more likely to sustain motivation if your goals connect in some way to something larger. So keep that in mind. So last of all, there are 2 things. One is I really want to encourage people, and some of you may already have been doing this at the start of the year or toward the end of the year, but purging is something that I always do. And I don't have a lot to purge personally, but I'm always in the habit at the end of the year, the beginning of the new year, I'm purging. Like whatever I can purge. I just want to create space. And in order to create space, which is vital to taking action and staying motivated, we have to purge. So sometimes that means purging bad habits. It can mean purging bad habits that you might have with your partner, like a rut that you've gotten into with your significant other that is causing you to leak energy and to feel drained. And so sometimes going to that person to say, hey, there are a few things I want to work on because it's really taking a lot of my capacity. And I have big ambitions for myself this year, but I know I feel kind of drained from this dynamic that we've been sort of like gotten into a rhythm with. So when I talk about purging, I don't just mean the obvious things like clutter, like your refrigerator, like your closets. I mean purging negative energy, purging bad habits, working with your friends to basically say, look, I think I'm drinking too much. And by the time I'm done having those few drinks with you to unwind, whether it's in Zoom or real life, I'm sort of depleted and then I have no more motivation for the rest of the evening. So it's really important to do a checklist. I would, again, recommend that this be something you write down on paper. What do you need to purge? And this can be itsy bitsy things or big things. And again, like Lisa said, it doesn't mean that because you put something big down that you need to purge that it's going to happen right now. But this all becomes the fabric of what these goals are about. And then the last thing is how important it is to to prepare. So one of the things that I'm a big advocate of is taking time every Sunday. I'm an advocate for Sunday morning, Sunday evening, whenever you have bandwidth to really get still and to get quiet. And this is my time to pause. It's to reflect on the coming week. When will I fit in my workouts? When will I do any remaining food prep that I might not have gotten done on Sunday? When am I going to read beyond just a few minutes before I go to bed and get sleepy, but like where I want to knock out, 80 pages. When am I going to read? I really sit down on Sunday and map out my week. And it's interesting because sometimes people say, well, gosh, that just sounds so structured. Like I like being more spontaneous. But what I've found in my own life and in working with a lot of people is that actually the people that are more prepared on the front end are actually able to be more spontaneous on the back end without it coming back to bite you in the butt.
Yes.
So a lot of people that aren't prepared still are spontaneous, but then they get into pickles because they didn't prepare for things. So then they've gone off for a fun adventure, but by the time they get back, they're under the wire and they're stressed. So I'm a big advocate of planning on Sunday nights and then each day at the end of your workday, just taking stock of like what didn't get done, what did get done, what you need to move around in your schedule. But that planning and preparing piece is really important.
So personally, I do that Sundays. That's my grocery shopping day. That's my food prep day. I have a calendar on my refrigerator where I write daily what we're going to have for dinner that week. So that's something that I have it's a natural instinct for me because I'm such a planner, but I know that's not a natural instinct for a lot of people. But I know that, like you said, it's kind of ironic that allows me to be more spontaneous on the back end. So that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So we are at our time, Stacy. So if we want to kind of wrap things up and then I'll open it up for questions. We've gotten a lot of great comments that say, great action points. Thank you for doing this, blah, blah, blah. But so we want to do at the end of every week, we want to do what's called a calls to action. All right, what are you going to do based on what you learned this week? And then next week we'll have new calls to action based on the new topic. So don't get overwhelmed. And, you can take your time with this and you do not have to do it all at once, but we're just trying to help you kind of get in the right headspace and clear your mind and get started on the right path. So the number one thing is reflect on what you learned today. Even if you can only take one piece of information that you learned today and start doing that this week, that's better than nothing. So reflect on what you learned and look at something that you can implement from either something that Stacy said or something that I said. Obviously, if you're thinking about joining a gym or hiring a personal trainer, that's where I come in at Milestone. And if you are thinking about hiring a life coach, if you really love what Stacy has to say, and I can testify that she lives this life. She does not just preach it, she practices it. She's not saying, I sit down every Sunday. She's not just saying that, she really does that. And so if you want to hire somebody who walks the walk and can help you live that same lifestyle, she's perfect for that. Obviously, those are things that you can do. Those are the obvious things. But Stacy, what are some calls to action from you?
Okay, so I want to encourage people, even if you've already done this, I think it just doesn't hurt to just brush up a little bit on it, even if you recently did it. But I want to encourage people to do that reflecting sometime between now and next Monday, to carve out time to actually ask yourself those questions. Because even if you have already set your word of the year, or you've already set your goals, I still think that these exercises are insightful. So one call to action would be to take time to reflect on that and to really kind of look at your vision. The second thing is, again, if you like the idea of a word and you haven't yet chosen one, I would encourage you to take your attempt. And by the way, sometimes coming up with the word of the year, I went through many iterations of that word. And actually just 3 days ago, what were we, 7 days into the year, I just kept getting this feeling that like the word I chose wasn't the right word this year. And that's really the first time that's kind of happened for me, but I just abandoned it. And that was when I came up with exuberant. I felt like that was much more specific to what I wanted. So, reflect on your word of the year and maybe come up with some ideas if you don't have the exact one. And then maybe you could bring that to your friends and family and get their opinions. And then lastly, I would say from the first section of our call would be to write down some goals that you want to create. And as Lisa's mentioned, it's important for those to be manageable and specific, and to the extent possible that you can quantify and measure them. And then when we talked here at the end about purging, maybe that's something that you can do over the week. And I'm not saying like take on your garage or take on your basement, but I'm really specifically interested in more of the mental and emotional purging that people need to do, because I find that it's that causes them to often get into trouble. So I want to recommend taking action on that. And then lastly, if you can integrate also the idea of spending some time planning your week. And you don't have to wait until next Sunday to do that, by the way. It is just Monday. So you can do that now for the week, and then try it out on Sunday when you get to next week and see what it's like to not be doing this on a rushed work day. So those are our calls to action for the week.
Okay, so obviously we went over just a little bit, but we're so excited and we have so much information between the two of us. It's hard to rein it all in. But I did type in here, if anybody has any questions, now could be the time that you could ask. And like I said, you can contact us directly if you have a private question that you want to ask and you don't want to. Okay.
Yeah, while Lisa's looking at that question, I'll just say that we kind of plan 30 minutes, 20 minutes to talk, knowing that there may be questions, they may not. You can always drop off at 20 minutes. We're going to do the full 30 minutes and just kind of talk through it if there are no questions, but leave 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, so someone said, could you please post the first questions, like what attributes in myself were not pleasant, etc. Just so you know, you can go back and watch this video. It's going to be saved on Milestone's Facebook page, and we're going to have it on Milestone's YouTube page as well. And Stacy can send it out to her clients. And if you did sign up to receive the reminder emails, there's going to be a link to this one in next week's reminder. So you can go back. There'll be multiple opportunities for you to go back and do this, and you can rewatch it because Stacy does talk very quickly. That's one of her personality traits. And so that's just something to kind of keep up with, but you will be able to watch this again and take those ideas down. Okay, I don't think we have any questions. Just a lot of really great comments saying thank you, and they loved it. And we had over 70 people viewing at any given time.
Yay.
So thank you all so much for tuning in today. We'll be back here next Monday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Stacy's time. She's in Texas, if you guys didn't know, and we're here in Louisville. So thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, so next week is creating your support system. So be thinking, come to the session next week with some thoughts, just personally. I know we're not sharing as a group, but just some of your own challenges to see if maybe some of the things we talk about addresses that. So thanks everybody for your time today. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.